Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha with Ice Cream Fitness here. Today I want to briefly answer a question I get all the time, and it's one I got asked again this morning in the comments. But hold on, let me give you guys a bicep shot first. Okay, and that question is, why does person X lift such a huge amount of weight on a given lift, yet a certain body part is so small? An example given this morning was a Olympic lifter was listed, and they had basically said that he can squat 300 kilos, but his quad development isn't that impressive. And yet we will see other Olympic lifters and even competitive power lifters, and all of these guys are probably on gear, including the Olympic guy. Nobody squats 300 kilos natural, and nobody competes in the Olympics natural. But that's besides the point here. Who have better quad development and bigger thighs, even using less weight. And what people fail to realize is that muscle growth and muscle growth potential and even muscle growth response to a given training style is largely genetic. And someone I like to talk to regularly on Facebook, and he's involved in a lot of the Facebook circles as far as training, and he is an expert in the field, is Trevor Johnson, and he loves to discuss it. That's his forte, is discussing the differences in genetics in regard to training response. Now, we're different, but we're not so different that certain rules don't apply to everybody, but there is differences in genetic muscular potential and how fast you're going to grow or how much total growth you can give from a given training response. And this is very much different. And that is a very, very common thing that's noted with muscles. Now, when we talk about someone like Jay Cutler, that's a different scenario because people will point out, well, I'm on gear and I curl more weight than Jay Cutler does, and I hear people say that on that same lift for the same number of reps, yet his biceps are bigger. And I would point out that one, he's a genetic freak, and he could probably curl 20-pound dumbbells and still have huge biceps, and two, he uses a huge amount of site enhancement. He injects a lot of stuff into his biceps, which I would suggest when we saw that bicep tear a while back, to me that looked like a classic abscess. When I saw that when Jay Cutler a few years back had that problem at the Olympia, that was clearly in those photos absolutely not a muscle tear. That was an infection. That was a pussy abscess from a bad injection that got infected. But that's common in the pro ranks. You've got to look at the fact that there's so much site enhancement in pro bodybuilding and even amateur bodybuilding at the So discounting that, and we go back to bigger muscles and things like quads, we do see that difference. And you take me, for example, I can get huge quads doing nothing but low rep squats. That is all I have to do. I don't have to do 5 reps. I don't have to do 10 reps. I can do doubles and triples on nothing but squats, and I can develop huge quads. And a lot of you guys notice my quads, but that is very much genetic. I had big thighs as a runner. As a runner, my thighs looked like a natural bodybuilder's before I started lifting weights. When I got down reasonably lean as a distance runner, before I started lifting. And then they blew up when I started squatting. And for me, it's just a genetic trait. I would have big quads if I didn't do legs at all, period. And when I do heavy leg training, they don't grow any faster from high reps than they do from low reps. It's just my genetics in that regard. I'm genetically blessed in that area. Whereas in someone else wouldn't have that response. So that's one thing to consider, is that genetic response to training style. And some people will, with something like their thighs, will need higher reps for them to develop, and others can develop amazing quads off of low rep squatting. That's it. That's all they need. So that's going to vary from person to person. But the thing is, progressive overload will always make it better. So you shouldn't compare a given muscle and say, because I lift X amount of weight for Y number of reps on a lift, that I should have a bigger body part than someone who doesn't. That's not true. Now, that body part will get bigger as you get stronger. That same individual, I promise you, he had bigger quads while squatting 300 kilos than he did when he was only at 200 kilos. And just like the guys who had bigger quads than him who might squat less, they had smaller quads when they were weaker. So it is that progressive overload that matters in regards to you as an individual. As you continue to progress in your overload, you will see improvements, but do not expect a direct correlation in muscle size between you and someone else's strength on a given lift. And that's a big mistake. And some people, even with drugs, will not get as big as you would think they will. Regardless of training style or what they put into their body, there will always be limits for a given individual on how big they can possibly get. And these standards get skewed because people are used to seeing the genetic freaks, whether it's the genetic freaks in natural bodybuilding or the genetic physiques in heavily enhanced bodybuilding. Those people are not a good standard to use because an average person will not obtain their proportions and size, even using the same drugs that they use, or even if they're a natural not using drugs. It's unrealistic. So do not use those individuals either as that standard of what you think is obtainable, because that really skews our view as to what is a decent body part for the average Joe, and even for the average enhanced Joe. So that's something to keep in perspective. So what it comes down to is these differences we see in strength or total workload being put onto a muscle, and development versus lack of development is largely genetic differences in that individual. Alright guys, well, that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it has been informative, and I will talk to you next time.